every one of our clients has ATO debt, but we obviously follow the market very closely. And look, there's been a lot in the press about this burgeoning tax debt, and prior to COVID, the numbers around $26 billion, which sounds a big number, but as I guess a share of government revenue from tax, I think it's around about 5% of it. But what we have seen is that $26 billion has become $56 billion officially since 30 June last year. There's a lot more businesses out there that have ATO debt, but we're also seeing that the average tax debt that certainly I don't think our client base has changed dramatically over the years. The average debt we used to see was around about the $400,000 mark, and we're now seeing it's around the $800,000 to $900,000 mark, and we're regularly seeing debts in excess of $1 million. I think our range at the moment is about $100,000 to $9 million in terms of debt. What that has meant, as I said, there's a lot more businesses that have debt, but it also means that there's a lot of businesses out there that might have traditionally got into a long-term payment plan to clear the debt, but can no longer do that because the debt's too big, and they need specialty finance to come in to help either pay the debt out in full, as you've done on a number of occasions, or to support a payment plan or some sort of hybrid arrangement. And I think that's one of the things that certainly we're seeing is that people like yourself are incredibly valuable to certainly our business, but also to the wider community out there, because not everybody can structure the debts the way, or the deals the way that you do. And a lot of people, they see ATO and throw their hands up in the air, but I suspect when you see ATO, you sort of do this and go, great, we can help.
I do that exactly because
Yeah.
I really enjoy this journey, and I call it the journey of becoming bankable. And it started a long time ago for me in finding the right funders to align with what we wanted to do. I call them stepping stone solutions, and that's very much what it is, because sometimes it does entail private funding, which can have a little bit of a negative connotation, but really those funders are in the market for a reason. They're
Mm.
not the loan sharks of 30 plus years ago. They're all regulated companies that are just looking to have a place in the market to support people who have got into a bit of strife. There's also the well-known second tier or specialist non-conforming funders, the Peppers and Latrobes of the world. They have a lot of products that allow for that consolidation piece. Where we've sort of had a lot of success is where a client is very close to that point of the ATO making a large move against them, or they're not able to grow their business because they can't obtain the funding to purchase assets, get cash flow, what have you. So if we're able to solve the problem, then we can transition them back to a major bank. Usually within 6 to 12 months is the average time to bring them back. And it's just a tidy up process and knowing where to place them at the right time, because not always just a simple step back from the major bank will solve the problem. Sometimes we do need to do something a little bit more strategic, a little bit more drastic. A client that we helped recently, they simply did not have enough equity to be able to
Mm.
use any of those options. So I had to think quite creatively of, okay, well, what do we have available here? And what we did have available was a large contract with a mining company that's valuable and is something that can be leveraged. There was a small amount of equity in a home. So we were able to leverage what we could, and we got in contact with yourself and the team. Using what we could leverage, we've now been able to get the ATO off their back, and you're putting in place a payment plan, which means they're able to get the funding they need, which is some large equipment for their upcoming project. Without doing all of that, if we just looked at it as at face value and put our hands up and said, there's not enough equity, which means we can't bring in a private funder who's very much LVR driven. We can't use one of the non-conforming options, and we certainly can't use a major bank. If we just stopped there, that client would not be able to proceed with this contract, which is essentially going to put them into a different league in their
Yes.
business and set them up for the future.
Yeah, and look, it's a perfect story. And look, one of the things I often say when I do a lot of sort of speaking engagements around this, and what I always say is that there is almost always a solution. And it's and people often, we see people and they're sort of fair way down the rabbit hole, and they think, we're going to lose the business. There's nowhere to go. What can we do around this? But there's almost always a solution, and really it's around getting the right advisors around them, and getting the right people like yourself who can do the funding piece, and then we come in and do the piece that we do in terms of stopping the ATO recovery action, designing a solution that the ATO can improve. And then what we like to do is to bring the ATO into the solution rather than them being the problem, because we all know that the ATO are very tough at the moment. They're moving very, very quickly, and they can blow up a deal, almost overnight. And we're seeing that a lot from, I'll get a call from a broker and say, look, we were partway through settling this complex transaction, and the ATO issued a director penalty notice, and now the director's thinking about liquidating, or they sent the reporter to the credit reporting agencies, and now the funders are sort of backing away from it. Or the one that we're seeing quite a lot of at the moment is that the ATO are actually issuing statutory demands much more quickly than they used to. We had a construction company that we work with, well, we're working with currently, and they're a really, really good example. That their debt wasn't massive, but it was $350,000, and they didn't have it. Their accountant had been trying for some months to get a payment plan in place. The ATO, they just weren't able to meet what the ATO were looking for. And it meant that in that time they'd had credit reporting, which meant they couldn't actually get funding to do, very similar to your example, where they couldn't get funding to actually do the next project, which was actually going to get them out the other side. They got a significant amount of interest there, and again, there's no way the ATO can look at that because they're non-compliant, because they don't have a payment plan in place. On top of that, the directors had received director penalty notices. They'd expired by the time we saw it, so it was a bit of a mess. And it wasn't really the accountant's fault, because what he was putting to the ATO was reasonable, but they just couldn't put it in a form that the ATO could agree to. But the biggest issue was they were 5 minutes away from a statutory demand. We were able to get them into a long-term payment plan, which they could afford. If a statutory demand came through, it meant that what the ATO would agree to, a long-term payment plan, was off the table. The ATO cannot give a long-term payment plan if there's a statutory demand that's been issued. You need a significant upfront, 30 to 50% upfront. This business could not have done that, and they would have been wound up. So that, I think the secret around there is, yes, partially it's getting the right people, but this one's around time. And time is the big thing I'm pushing a lot of people on at the moment. And particularly we're coming up to Christmas. A lot of people go, oh, well, it's Christmas time, the ATO go on holidays. They don't. The clock still keeps ticking. Action still keeps moving. And while people are on holidays, the ATO is not, and then they come back from their holidays and they've got this nasty thing in the mailbox. So the other way I look at it is get it fixed beforehand, and then go and have a holiday, and you can actually have a much better holiday yourself.